My name is Nicholas Ryan Purcell, and I have a condition called Asperger syndrome. Asperger syndrome is also known as autism spectrum disorder. At the age of 13, I was diagnosed with Asperger syndrome, but also faced with depression from an early age. In this documentary film, I want to revisit those places that were significant to me, but also to acknowledge those people who helped to navigate me through those most challenging times. I was born on the 5th of January 1990.
He seemed to have hearing problems at the beginning, and he had problems with his balance as a result.
Nicholas knew all his colours and all his shapes from a very, very, very early age. And that was thanks to the early learning centre that we bought him. And we would be driving along in the car and Nicholas would see the gable end of a house and he'd say, triangle. But he would say triangle about 500 times, this echolalia that goes with the autistic spectrum, and it was triangle, triangle, triangle.
The term echolalia is where people on the autism spectrum repeat the same word or phrase. I often spoke as if I was a record player that got stuck, saying the same thing over and over.
When Nicholas was about 3 years of age, we were called to speech therapy because it was clear that his speech was quite slow and Nicholas wasn't able to put a sentence together. It was such a negative session. I was so upset when I came out. So about 3 years later then, I got a letter in the post and it was from the head of the speech therapy department, Sean O'Connell. So Sean O'Connell did a series of 4 tests, 1 test a week, I think, with Nicholas. And at the end of the 4 weeks, he said, Nicholas meets the criteria for semantic pragmatic disorder. Okay, while it's not full-blown autism, it's on the autistic spectrum. But Nicholas is also hyperlexic. And this means that Nicholas was reading, writing and spelling way beyond his years. But his problem obviously was that he didn't understand what he was reading, writing and spelling.
The social interactions that Nicholas needed to be involved in everyday activities was tiring for him, was difficult for him. And I remember either Tony Atwood or Professor Fitzgerald talking about carrying all the weight of that, like almost carrying a tray of glasses, and that we pile on another glass and another glass and another glass, and then the last glass is just too much. And it might be nothing to do with that, but that's the thing that sends the child into meltdown, for example.
If he was sitting down, he was rocking from side to side. If he was standing, his hands were kind of flapping a bit. And I subsequently learned that this is called stimming, and it's a shortened version of stimulative behaviour. Sean O'Connell decided that maybe he should try to stop Nicholas stimming quite so much. So he made Nicholas sit on his hands. Nicholas developed the most horrendous stutter. He just couldn't speak. By Sean getting Nicholas to sit on his hands to stop the stimming, he pushed in that protrusion back into the balloon, but that protrusion was going to come out somewhere else. And it came out in the form of stuttering. Sean stopped telling Nicholas to stop stimming and the stutter stopped.
I felt very fortunate to have grown up in such a good, tight-knit, supportive community in the village of Emley in West Tipperary. People always encouraged me, praised me, brought out the best in me. But any time I met people, whether it was out on footpaths or whether it was in the local shop, they always took the time to talk to me and find out how was I doing. So therefore, I felt really, really good about myself and really happy about myself when people just gave me so much time as a child. And they were always willing to talk to me and find out how was everything going.
We lived on the Cullen Road, a place called Lisheen, Emley. It was a lovely old place, a lovely old doctor's house that was on about 2 to 3 acres. And we had super neighbours. on that road.
When Nicholas was 4, rising 5, everybody was telling me he must go to school. And of course I began to panic, because while Nicholas knew all his colours and his shapes, he could only say words. He wasn't joining the words together to make a sentence. And one day I met Mary McGrath in Emly, and I told her of my plight. And she said, "But why does he need to go to school this year?" And I said, "Because everybody tells me he does." And she said, "Look, you know your own child best. If you think it's better to leave him at home for another year, then leave him at home for another year." And this removed a 10-ton weight off my shoulders. It changed everything.
I started primary school when I was 5 years of age. When I was in first class, our neighbour John Joe McGrath, who lived in the townland of Farn, said to my mother that he does a school run for our road every afternoon and would be happy to include Nicholas, as he was passing the gate anyway. My mother was delighted with this arrangement. When I finished school on one particular day, I cleared my desk, packed my bag and left the building to go home. As soon as I walked out onto the pavement, I saw a row of cars in front of me. And the first car, I saw this beautiful dark red Toyota Carina car parked in front of me. It was our neighbour John Joe McGrath. As soon as I got into the car, John Joe asked me, "Well, how did school go today? Tell me about the highlights." Then he would tell me all about his wife Kitty, his 2 sons and his greyhounds. He was a very kind, understanding and compassionate man that always gave me the time to talk if ever I needed to get emotions out of my mind. John Joe McGrath always lit that internal flame within me, because he became a grandfather figure to me, but also a guardian angel figure, making me feel so happy about myself. Since starting primary school in September 1995, I always enjoyed going to school because it had routine, it had structure, and also I had my own desk and I had my own space. And if something happened out of the blue or spontaneously, I became extremely frightened and extremely panicked because I wasn't prepared for that particular situation. On one particular day in Emly National School, our class teacher was absent, so therefore we had to move up to a higher level classroom. At that moment I grabbed onto the table and screamed and screamed and screamed. I was moving out of my comfort zone.
He was difficult in the beginning. He was a difficult package to deal with in the beginning, and Dorothy just kept her thumb on him from the very beginning, wouldn't tolerate any nonsense at all. And it was her attention to it and her constant care of him and her worry about him that has made him into what he is today. Every move he makes right up to the present moment is in association with Dorothy, and without her he would have gone off on that course and he could have ended up any way at all. Yeah, he got on very well with my mother, definitely, and with Dorothy's mother, no doubt about it. My mother had great patience with him and always treated him as normal and so forth.
Mother used to give out to him, and we used to say, "Oh, poor Nicholas," or feel it very much. That we realised that his mother had never put her foot wrong in his upbringing.
My job is not to be liked by my child. My job is to make sure that my child is liked by everybody else.
In this whole area of autism spectrum disorder, it's well known that early intervention is going to bring about better results and a more pleasant experience for the life experience of the child, really.
When Nicholas was in, I presume it was senior infants, their workbooks had pictures of coins in them, of pennies, because back then it was the Irish punt. In the picture, there could have been 1 penny, 5 pence and 10 pence. So the question was, add the value of the coins. Nicholas would put down 3 because there were 3 coins. He just took everything at face value. To help Nicholas to understand the different meaning of the value of the coins, I put a 50p piece on the table, and then I put a stack of 50 1-penny coins beside it. And I told Nicholas that the 50p piece is exactly the same value as the 50 1-penny coins, and I asked him which would be easier to carry around.
Down the road from our house at the Cross Emly was the local grocery store, which was owned by the Fogarty family. You were always filled in on the local news that was happening in the area anytime you went into the shop. Mrs. Fogarty always helped me by giving me so much time to help me add out the value of different coins.
I used to do the same with other children who came in if there was time in the shop, if there weren't people knocking around at the time. So we would count out what was owed to me and then put back what was left into Nicholas's hand. And bit by bit his confidence grew and we became good friends.
And when he came to the school originally, I think it must have been about second class, there was some problem over his mother had made out some type of a wall chart or a number chart, and he had been using that, and I think the class teacher said he couldn't use that particular way of doing things, so he had to get rid of that.
During break times in primary school, I used to pin myself against a stone wall, totally unable to mix with the other pupils, and just could never figure out why I was always different.
I taught him in 3rd and 4th, but I would have noticed him as he came up through the school, in the yard and playing and whatever. I thought he was a very quiet, gentle little boy, very unsure of himself.
Things began to get uneasy for me in the year 2000, the year of the millennium. I was in 3rd class in Emly National School. When the bell rang for us to go home, I walked out onto the pavement and I just did not see John Joe McGrath's car there. I had wondered where was he? Had he forgotten of me? Until one of the parents in the other cars told me that he had died of a heart attack earlier that day. At that moment, when I stood out on the pavement, things began to crumble for me and break in two, because I knew I was never going to see him again. And he was gone. Walking into St. Ailbe's Church in Emly, the place was absolutely packed full to capacity. There were tears shed everywhere. The place felt so dark and so cold and so empty, but yet milling with people. As soon as the coffin was being lowered into the ground, I just completely freaked, because I knew that he was gone, and he was gone forever. When the soil was being thrown in on top of the coffin, it was very final. Since John Joe McGrath's death, I became extremely unhappy that my mind began to plunge into total darkness. It was like this light bulb was suddenly switched off and everything became dark. John Joe McGrath's death had such an impact on me because my guardian angel figure had died, and therefore this led to this almighty depression. I was 10 years of age when the depression set in.
We only have 2 children, so they would have been with each other all the time and would have got to know each other very well. So I'm sure the relaxation of that probably helped him.
I felt like I was the older sibling, even though I'm 2 years younger than Nicholas, and I felt like in a way it was my duty to look after him. I did that because I wanted to, because I love my brother.
And all I notice is they never seem to fight like every other brother and sister did, like I always did with my brother and sisters, and argue. They were always so united as a brother and sister.
This whisper-like voice began to develop in the brain, telling me all the negative things about myself. The critical inner voice would tell me that that person thinks you're pathetic, or that person thinks you're a failure. So it was just so hard to hold in all of those emotions. One would ask, what is a critical inner voice? Or where did it come from? As well as hearing a negative voice in the mind telling me all sorts of abusive things about myself, I also used to see a black figure that was dressed in a black cloak and a black hood, but yet I could never see a face. It used to storm after me and chase after me and have this almighty shrieking voice that its energy field was like a hazy zone, and I could never ever see past that hazy zone or that hazy barrier. One particular day at home in Emly, I was up in my bedroom lying flat on the bed, and the voice was telling me all sorts of abusive things in my mind. Out of nowhere, my mother called me for lunch from the bottom of the stairs. And just like that, the voice in my head told me, don't you dare listen to your mother or I will kill you. So therefore I remained flat on the bed.
He was very long-suffering and patient, and he never shouted or made a noise or anything like that, and so well-mannered.
I realised from a very early age that there must always be a light at the end of the tunnel for Nicholas. There must always be something for him to look forward to. So that, you know, in the height of his difficulty, he knew he had something to look forward to. And whatever Nicholas was interested in, Olive and I made sure that we took him to these places.
Intense focus on a subject meant that I was brushed away from the negative thoughts. I needed to put full concentration to actually sponge out those negative thoughts.
It was like he was living in a tunnel and that nothing else existed, only that. I used to teach English as a foreign language, and this particular man that came worked with Scania. He brought Nicholas a model of a Scania truck, so he wanted a trip on a real live Scania truck. And Oliver's brother Charles told us that his brother-in-law, Billy Kiley, drove Scania trucks. Billy very, very kindly agreed to drive Nicholas to Dublin one day, and on another occasion to drive him to Cork. He lived on this joy for at least a month afterwards. In 2001, I bought an analogue camcorder. Nicholas started using this analogue camcorder very soon after I bought it, and it was quite clear that he had a flair for filming.
As I am a visual thinker, I immediately took to using this camcorder because I was seeing life through the lens, experimenting with colours, shapes and pictures.
But after a while, of course, he discovered that he couldn't edit with this camcorder because it wasn't digital. And he wanted to be able to edit. So he wanted a digital camcorder.
Shortly after buying the analogue camcorder in 2001, Mary Leahy organised for me a private tour of the Tipperary XL cinema and how it all works.
We used to take Nicholas to the Titanic experience in Cove because this was the last port of call of the Titanic in 1912. In the new year, in 2002, an ad came on the television for Build the Titanic. Nicholas then expressed an interest in getting a digital camcorder. I said to him, "Okay, Nicholas, the very day that you stick the last piece on that Titanic, we'll go into Tipperary town and we'll buy a camcorder." Now, with all people with Asperger's, you have to keep your promise. There is no way that you can promise something and then not do it, because their whole world falls apart. So issue 100 arrived. So we went into Ned Burke's shop in Tipperary town and bought the camcorder.
I actually really enjoyed constructing the model because it was as if I was building the real ship, but in model form. We actually went up to Belfast to see the Harland and Wolff site where the actual Titanic was built. My first video project actually took place in 2004, and this was a documentary on the Titanic in photographic form.
The famous Harland and Wolff shipyards, Belfast, opened in 1861. The shipyard is named after Edward Harland and Gustav Wolff.
People that know Nicholas now would never ever believe that he was nasty at one stage. The way to deal with his nastiness to either me or to anybody else was to make him feel ashamed, to just explain why you can't do it, show him that it was not the right thing to do. And he stopped. But he went the other way altogether. It was thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. He'd say thank you about 500 times. It's clear that Nicholas was different. And somebody did say to me, why label your child? And my instant response was, why not? Nicholas needed help. And if it took a label to get Nicholas help, bring on the label.
It wasn't until I was 13 years of age that I was referred to a consultant to try and make myself understood, to help to try and get a diagnosis and to find out what was wrong with me. In 6th class, a psychologist assessed me of my interaction with the other pupils. And it was then that I was referred on to Professor Michael Fitzgerald in Dublin, who subsequently gave me a diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome, autism spectrum disorder. Asperger's syndrome is a mild form of autism, which affects the individual's ability to perceive and process information around them. This really helped to explain as to why my social and communication skills were affected, and that it just wasn't me, it was my condition.
I had never heard of Asperger's syndrome or any of the other syndromes really, because I trained in 1966. There were no labels on any shortcomings like that.
And the school tell me that I was the first pupil in the school to be diagnosed with the condition.
In September 2003, Nicholas moved on to secondary school and he went to the Abbey in Tipperary town. And the reason we sent him to the Abbey was because of Michael Leahy, because Michael was a teacher there, and any time Michael spoke about teaching in the Abbey, he spoke with such passion. So we said, if this is what the Abbey is like, then we want Nicholas to go to the Abbey.
It was in June 2003 when Nicholas and his dad Oliver came to meet me at the school, and I remember meeting them in the yard and remarking initially at how well mannered Nicholas was, how well he spoke, how excited he was at the prospect of coming to secondary school. And then his dad went on to tell me about his diagnosis with Asperger's, and I kind of thought in my mind, how are we going to handle this? How is this going to work? But initially it was the sense of excitement on Nicholas's part, and I felt no matter what Asperger's syndrome was or what the effects of it could be, that this young man's excitement would conquer everything. I really felt he was so positive about this that it had to work.
As a student, I always looked up to the principal of the Abbey CBS school, John Heffernan, because he provided such a caring, supportive school that I could feel the need to talk to anybody if any emotions were troubling me. He used to be around the office and he used to simply wave at me and ask me how am I doing.
Any student with different challenges, I think the students tend to find out that very quickly, and the idea that they got resource hours and special individuals to work with them and take them in a separate room on their own, all that helped to show that, show us and keep reminding us that the individual is at the centre of education and it's not a group thing as much. The deputy principal now, Pat Donovan, he took on the role of heading the resource department, and Brenda O'Donnell and Anya Leahy particularly went and really worked with these students.
I was exempt from Irish, so therefore when the other students were having Irish, I had resource classes. And these resource classes were extremely meaningful to me because teachers firstly helped to break down waffle sentences into simple meanings. But also, more importantly, they were there for me whenever I needed help. And there was one particular resource teacher called Brenda O'Donnell. And when I was in resource geography class one day, I broke down in front of Brenda because the critical inner voice in my mind was telling me all sorts of abusive things about myself and that I was going to fail miserably at this subject. And Brenda was almost my saviour in the Abbey.
I remember one particular day when he was very, very emotional, and Brenda came to me about it, and we ended up, I decided certainly the only way to deal with this is to bring his parents in. His parents handed him over to the school in one sense, in that they weren't intrusive. They trusted our professionalism, they trusted the teachers who worked with him, and they were delighted to hear everything was going on. There was this implicit trust.
I needed an escape from the critical inner voice in the mind, and soon found out that trains became that escape for me. I always liked trains because the sound of the locomotive stimulated me completely. I always liked checking routine. I liked checking timetables to seeing which train would come in first, which train would come in second, and so forth. So therefore, trains always gave me that sense of fulfillment and escape. In Emly, our family lived within walking distance of the local level crossing on the Dublin-Cork line. And the reason for the level crossing is because this is where Emly railway station used to be until it closed down in 1963. At the level crossing, all of a sudden I heard this whine on the track that a train was approaching. Just like that, the warning bells would come on, the lights would flash, and the barriers would lower. Instantly, this speeding train swooshed past me. I remember so well on one particular day after the barriers had raised. I looked across and I saw a herd of cows, and herding the cows were Pat Burke and his son John. Pat and John Burke were actually dairy farmers, and they lived right beside the level crossing, and never once did they hunt me away or silence me on my interest in trains. They actually let me continue until I felt I had enough. Any time I didn't see the cows being herded, I went up to their house and I saw Mrs. Burke, and she smiled, said, "Come on in, Nicholas, for tea." And therefore I felt that the Burke's family house soon became a haven for me, and their family made me feel the same way that John Joe McGrath made me feel. In other words, happy and content within myself. There were so many laughs, so many stories, so much happiness shared in that house that I always felt really good about myself whenever I was around the Burkes. My mother brought me to Limerick Junction on many occasions to watch trains coming and going, and the presence of trains always gave me that sense of exhilaration.
One particular time, this beautiful blue steam train arrived into Limerick Junction. But little did I know that this was the start of an absolute passionate love affair between Nicholas and steam trains. They were his saviour.
One thing led to another, and I would have seen an advertisement around 2005 in the Independent of the fact that a steam train was coming to Wexford, and as a result we went down there. And my wife and her sister Jennifer, they're both quite scatty really, you know, and we went on the train. They were like two children, the two of them. I don't know which were more childlike, Nicholas or the two of them.
When we got off the train at Rosslare Strand, I saw Oliver talking to a man in an orange jacket. This was obviously an RPSI official. He turned out to be a man called Wesley Riddle from Dublin, and Oliver introduced Nicholas to Wesley.
At the time when I was introduced, I was 15 years of age.
So that developed into a lasting friendship.
In my opinion, Wesley became a guardian angel to Nicholas.
Sometimes you dig up the past, and sometimes the past is not a good thing, because they tell you that the past shapes the future for them. And I remember when I was at school, one of the famous sayings our headmaster used to say was, history repeats itself. It goes around in a cycle and eventually comes back around, and what goes around comes around. If you do nasty things, it comes back to haunt you at a later date. You don't get away scot-free.
His presence created so much, and Wesley's energies just made me break out into a smile, no matter what time of day it was or no matter when I saw him.
And you were so generous that time of giving me the Sure Belly. I still have it. I keep it as a piece of treasure at home.
As a surprise for Nicholas's birthday one year, I rang Wesley and asked him, is there any way that he'd come down and stay with us overnight and just come down for Nicholas's birthday, because sure, Wesley was like a god to Nicholas. So Nicholas and I decided between us that we would take a trip to the West Clare Railway, because it was a narrow gauge railway. So off we went, headed off in the car, and I said to Nicholas, come on, let's go to Limerick Junction for fun to see if there are any nice trains. And Nicholas looked at me a bit strangely and wondered why were we going to Limerick Junction. So a train arrived in a few minutes after we got there.
I was keeping my focus on the locomotive, and all of a sudden Mum called me, and I remember being absolutely stunned because I saw this man in front of me that meant so much to me, Wesley Riddle.
Greetings from Dublin, from the RPSI, to my friend Nicholas Ryan Purcell and his family at Emly in County Tipperary.
You're mad and very interested in trains.
That's me.
Yeah. And this is the younger man.
We went to the West Clare yesterday on Footbridge North. He's going to do a course when they get going soon on how to become a fireman. Isn't that right, Nicholas?
Because without Wesley, Nicholas's experience with the steam trains and with the RPSI would have been much poorer.
The Railway Preservation Society of Ireland meant so much to me, because any time I boarded a special train, the stewards on the train, the drivers and all the crew always encouraged me. They always used to say, "It is so good to see you, Nicholas." And that alone gave me that internal lift.
They were Nicholas's second family.
Good to have those, the map and all in the back, yeah.
Whenever you're ready, Nicholas, you get in touch with us and send the stuff, and we'll get it on the website, no trouble.
Brilliant.
And others will see it.
Thanks again.
Yeah, they really did encourage him, and he loved it. He just loved it. And it was super for him to have it.
I always remember after a weekend in particular, when you'd come in on a Monday morning, Nicholas would regularly be around the office, and there might have been a steam train excursion the previous weekend, and you would get a blow account of that particular event, and we all became experts on steam trains and steam engines, but he just loved being able to tell you.
In the Abbey CBS, one of the teachers, Richard Walsh, was the school's videographer, and he took me under his wing and taught me how to use video editing software. Richard Walsh asked me to be one of the videographers at his daughter's wedding. On the grounds of the Abbey CBS school was an old stone building, which was the old milking parlour, and this was converted into a fabulous resource centre.
And we named it the Mary Rice Centre because Edmund Rice's daughter had special needs, and therefore we felt it was quite appropriate in the context of the Christian Brothers. We were lucky to be able to have the Minister for Education at the time in 2005, Mary Hanifin, come to open the building, and she engages in quite a long conversation with Nicholas, which I believe was recorded on local radio. And as the conversation went on, Nicholas interjected by saying the Abbey School is like heaven. And to me, this was an incredible statement.
I think the school is like heaven.
You think the school is like heaven? I'm glad yourself. You know.
Great school.
Do you know what? I think they won't give you any homework for about a month.
The work that the teachers had done, the efforts that had been made had all been worthwhile, because Nicholas was basically saying, I feel comfortable. This wasn't even prompted, it totally came from Nicholas himself, and it was just one of the most remarkable things I've heard in my time in that school, you know.
And how many children use it? Many boys?
Well, it's used to about 40.
About 40, exactly.
Yeah.
Use it at different times.
Yeah.
And how many teachers work there?
About 8, 7, 8.
Isn't that great?
It's
a
great.
special centre to help
Yeah.
everybody.
We'll pull it from this side.
I'll pull it from the wrong side. Tell you what, you'll have to pull it then, Nicholas. There you go.
Look, here you are, look, here.
Good man. In, a dó, a 3. Well done.
And as far as secondary school is concerned, I, for various reasons, decided to up sticks and move from Emly to North Tipperary.
My first reaction was one of shock. 100 different emotions went through my mind when I heard that, but the main one was worry, and I just hoped that it would work out.
We were sorry selling our house in Emly. We were sorry to be leaving all our Emly friends behind.
In 2006, when the new school term started, it was like walking through an invisible curtain, unsure what was going to happen. Anyway, a teacher came up to me and clapped his hands in front of me, telling me to wake up and go off to my class. It was so hard at the time to hold in those emotions.
So when Nicholas came home, I knew straight away there was something wrong. So eventually the tears started pouring.
I just felt absolutely awful, because it was for purely selfish reasons. I moved my family from Emly to Cloughjordan, but he'd had this friendship developed with Wesley Riddle.
I think Nicholas must have been on the phone to Wesley for about 2 hours, and Wesley calmed him down. Nicholas would ring Wesley every so often, and the conversations would last an hour. And poor Wesley, on the other end of the phone, listening to Nicholas. But listen, he did. He never ever hunted Nicholas off the phone.
Dear Nicholas, you are a wonderful person for a 16-year-old and a great asset to the RPSI. I am very proud to know you and to count you as my friend. And I am sure you will not only be a great asset to the school, but you will convert them to think STEAM. I am always pleased to hear from you by phone or letter. Please give my best regards to all the family members. Cheers for now, and God bless you all. Your friend as always, Wesley.
When Nicholas went into school the next day, then Olive and I went in to the school as well, and we met Mary Whelan, and she had warned all the teachers that Nicholas was coming, but she knew something had gone wrong.
His parents came in and met the principal and the deputy principal, but really didn't meet the TY teachers or the coordinator of special needs. And we didn't, it just didn't happen for Nicholas. So that was very difficult. That was hard for him. He was extremely well behaved, and teachers love well behaved children. And when you're very well behaved, people don't often see your difficulties, whether they're academic or emotional or whatever. It's quite amazing. If a child is screaming up the walls, you'll be much more alert to what's going on there. But Nicholas was very good.
Towards the end of transition year in Nina CBS Secondary School, there was a lot of talk of a Student of the Year prize.
Michael Durek, I thought it is lovely that he told Nicholas why he got it, and he said that his work ethic, he participated in everything, and do the staff think that everybody should be included in the school, and there should be allowances made for any difficulties anybody has. And I think that night confirmed it for me that the school had moved on big time, and Nicholas won that fair and square.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's all very nice to see you here tonight. During the week of work experience in December, I learned a range of skills in restoring furniture, including rewebbing a chair and cleaning glass and mirrors. In the old days, oak furniture was not expensive to get as it is found in Ireland, but mahogany was expensive and difficult to get as it is foreign wood from the rainforests in Brazil and Africa.
Since leaving the Abbey CBS school, one of my old teachers, Conor O'Callaghan, became my contact point for the school.
And when I found out, of course, that he was in Nina CBS, I realised my worries were unfounded, because they obviously were working on the same philosophy as we were at the time of the whole Christian Brothers ethos, which was to care for students, particularly those with disadvantages, and to be an inclusive, welcoming school.
I remember I opted to take on German for the Leaving Cert curriculum. In 5th year, the teacher then turned on the projector, and all of a sudden I saw a PowerPoint slide on the screen illustrating how to say a particular thing in the German language. And as a result, I adopted the PowerPoint method for all of my Leaving Cert subjects in school.
Nicholas had been accepted into Ballyfermot College of Further Education at this stage for the course on TV and film, provided he passed his Leaving Cert. So I drew a tunnel. And I told Nicholas there was a light at the end of the tunnel and that Ballyfermot was written across that light. But there was a hurdle in the middle, and that hurdle was the Leaving Cert. And all he had to do was pop over that hurdle and he'd have a free run to Ballyfermot.
On the morning when the Leaving Cert results were issued, I remember getting up that morning and the critical inner voice telling me in the mind that I was going to do so badly and I was going to fail the Leaving Cert and I was not going to get to college. I was full of tension and anxiety, wondering what on earth was going to happen if I'd failed the Leaving Cert.
Not only did he pass, but he got honours in everything. Well, I was so happy, I nearly cried.
The transition from 2nd level education onto 3rd level education was not very strenuous for me, because I had already passed what I had to pass, which was a Leaving Cert. But yet, when I was in college, I felt extremely fortunate to have had the guidance counsellor, Orla Nibreen, one of the students, Stephen Caswell, and one of the tutors, Conor Crosby, as people I could go to if any emotions were troubling me. And my cousins in Dublin provided me with a sense of comfort and security. But yet, they used to come with our family on steam train outings.
One of the modules that Nicholas had to do in college required him to make a short film. So he made a silent film, and Nicholas discovered that there was a college film festival in Somerset, Kentucky. And he asked permission of the college to enter that film in the film festival in Somerset. Anyway, Nicholas won the Spirit Award as the best foreign film to depict independent filmmaking. And they were really enthralled because some of the students had never met anybody with Asperger's. And I mean, Nicholas, he was well able to communicate and well able to talk to everybody, but I suppose he was just that bit different. I mean, you know, he is quirky.
During my time in Ballyfermot College, the Irish Railway Record Society, located beside Heuston Station in Dublin, became another outlet for me. They hold printed archival railway material, but also they hold talks and discussions on railway topics. In 2012, I graduated from Ballyfermot College with a higher national diploma in television operations and production. After being declined jobs, I began setting up a video production venture, producing corporate videos for people.
It would be very helpful for somebody on the spectrum if they had a mentor to support them in increasing their work skills and in getting employment. Sometimes all it takes is one person to take an interest in the person on the spectrum, appreciate and value their skills and their abilities, and support them in the social aspects of their work life.
In 2013, Cloughjordan Eco Village in Tipperary entered the International Livable Community Awards in China, and as part of their entry, they needed a video. I felt so fortunate that Davy Phillip asked me to produce that video that would portray a day in the life of the Eco Village. And subsequently, the Eco Village went on to win top prize in this competition in China, receiving the gold medal. Despite this great victory, the critical inner voice was at me and getting more and more and more severe, desperately trying to get me to end it all. But my mother had instilled a great faith in me, saying that God is with us at all times. I was at my absolute lowest, fighting this voice, when my uncle Walter introduced me to a Buteyko breathing therapist in West Cork, Charles Maguire. Through various movements, Charles Maguire pulled this negativity out of me, and it was like this weight coming off me. This pure energy began to come over my body. Charles Maguire also released this straitjacket from me, which made me feel very tense ever since the depression set in. And when that jacket came off, I felt my body was more flexible. Charles Maguire taught me to breathe properly because I had been suffering from hyperventilation, which is excessive breathing through stress. And this causes fear, and it is the fear that allows the darkness back in. Charles Maguire completely changed my life.
Anyway, I remember Nicholas came back and he was a completely different person. He was like standing straight, he wasn't dragging his feet, he just looked happier, his eyes were brighter. It was just amazing, really.
There was a local racehorse winning on the international stage, just doing incredibly well. And there was an amazing story about the horse. And he had won in Ireland, in England, and in France. And the next thing he won in Australia. But the next thing the horse won in Ascot. And I said, well, what about a documentary? The Cahalan family entrusted the story of Gordon Lord Byron to Nicholas. And with their help and with Tom Hogan's help, Nicholas completed the documentary on Gordon Lord Byron, and he won 2 awards, one for editing and one for foreign feature. In a documentary festival in Hollywood, I said to Nicholas, you have to go to Hollywood.
Yeah, so I was just finishing my degree in Swansea in Wales, and Mum called me. Then Mum said, do you want to go to Hollywood? And I was like, yeah. And so I remember I left Swansea on the 4th of June, and on the 8th of June I was in LA. We were in LA, we were in Hollywood for 10 days. Sometimes we'd do stuff together, you know, like, I mean, out of the house together. But this was the first time we actually spent a lot of time together and doing something adventurous. You know, going to Hollywood was quite adventurous, you know, it's such a long flight. Well, Nicholas was in Kentucky once, but I was never in America before. And so it was an adventure that the two of us were on together. I remember at the awards anyway, Nicholas immediately turned on all the quirky movements and everything, and all the all jittery excitedness. And it was kind of in that moment that I sort of became really proud of Nicholas. So I just sat back and I just said, that's my brother.
Importance of family support. Why is that so important to you?
Well, I'm just very proud of my brother. You know, he's been making films and documentaries since the age of 14, and he's just excellent at what he does, and I'm so proud of him, so it's great just to be here with him. Yes.
Is this the longest trip that you've taken with him?
Yes, it is actually, yes.
All right.
It was a 12-hour flight from Ireland.
Yeah, that's right.
This should be the first of many.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming. Enjoy your stay and get all that you can out of it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
You know, when you think back of all the difficulties he had growing up, and, you know, perseverance on his part, and here he was in Hollywood. So well done, Nicholas.
Looking back on my early life, it is so nice to see how many people were actually there for me during my most troubling times. It is also great to see the new ASD Autism unit built on to Emily National School, and any time I go back there now, the pupils are just so happy. I'm humbled how many people have supported me throughout the production of this documentary film. I am now 28 years of age and full of confidence for the future.